Support WrestleTalk!
We generally agree that WWE Creative has been a smidge better under Triple H than under Vince McMahon. I mean, sure, at the moment it appears that the Lesnar-Omos match is real and not a massive prank, but there's still time for Trips to change that, right? And while we're talking about changes, there are still some glaring issues with the WWE product that Trips hasn't touched. So hey, while we're asking for stuff, I'm Adam from WrestleTalk, and here are 10 changes Triple H could make to WWE after WrestleMania 39. Number 1, split the undisputed belts. Almost a year on from his win in the biggest match ever against Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania 38, Roman Reigns' run as champ looks to be almost over. At the time, the decision to give Reigns both belts was questioned, even more so when Reigns transitioned to being a part-time dad to those new belts. The lack of a focal champion did admittedly do wonders for the stock of, say, the US title. However, despite WWE's best efforts, the lack of a world champion did ultimately hurt Monday nights quite a bit, with many on the Raw roster left rather directionless. Unless WWE plans to merge the titles for good and create one new definitive world championship, they should almost certainly make the decision to split the titles up at some point post-Mania. Roman's dominance ultimately left WWE with their hands tied when it came to splitting the belts, as Roman would of course have had to lose, and we all know how much WWE doesn't like doing that. With Cody, however, while WWE will obviously want to keep him strong, it's a lot easier to envision him losing one of those two belts without it hurting him too much. And you know what? Why wait? How about doing it the Raw after Mania? Start off the new WWE year with a bang and a real shake-up. Number 2, make the draft meaningful or scrap it. Speaking of shake-ups, once upon a time, the draft was something of consequence, a way for WWE to counteract potential staleness in their two brand rosters by doing some swapsies to generate new possibilities and feuds. That was once upon a time. However, the modern-day draft, or superstar shake-up as it later became known, was similar in theory, yet without any feeling of importance or significance. Wildcard rule, anyone? So how about after Mania, Triple H announces a definitive draft, one that ties exclusivity to stars with no crossover, either a complete reset or drafting entirely new rosters from scratch, or whip out a tombola and just pull a bunch of random names out. No matter what the execution, the more important thing is in the follow-through. Make it feel like something of consequence, or don't do it at all. Number 3, fix Raw's 3 hours. I know, in an ideal world, Triple H would answer our prayers and cut Raw back down to a nice, digestible 2 hours. Hell, take it down to 1 hour. I really don't want to watch it. But that's simply not going to happen, is it? We can say all the prayers, take all the vitamins, yet we won't get that 1 extra hour of our Mondays back. Granted, the Triple H era of creative has made those 3 hours a hell of a lot more bearable than they once were under Vince, but improvement can always be made. So if Triple H can't simply take an hour off Raw, what exactly can he do to deter it from feeling like a bit of a drag? In my opinion, less is more. Why not use that time to have longer matches, or even use the third hour of programming to take a look at WWE's past? Go into the vault and see what matches occurred on this day years ago. While it's not a lot, a little goes a long way to break up the monotony that can arise when faced with 3 hours every Monday. Number 4, add a women's mid-card title. Okay, now this one I've been extremely keen on for quite some time. Instead of throwing together teams at random with little to no explanation other than being goodies and baddies, I'm looking at you, Raquel Rodriguez, and whoever your BFF is this week. How about instead we scrap the tag belt and introduce a mid-card women's championship in a similar vein to AEW's TBS title? While Raw and SmackDown both have their respective world titles to fight for, there are far too many women without anything of substance to actually do. There are simply not enough established, believable teams for a tag division to make sense in WWE, so please, Trips, give your Tegan Noxes, Nikki Crosses, and Sonya Deville's something to strive towards winning. There is quite simply far too much talent going underutilized, and fixing that must be high in the priorities for Papa H. Maybe Steph truly was the mastermind behind the women's revolution after all. Ugh. Number 5, commission better entrance themes. Remember the day when a wrestler's entrance song was easily identifiable within the opening 3 seconds? Remember how a wrestler's theme matched their persona? Now tell me if either of those things have applied to more than a handful of the modern era of WWE's entrance themes. I'll wait. No, you can't say Kingdom, that's Cody's, not WWE's. Yes, while entrance music was once about as important as anything when it came to overall packaging a superstar, now it seems little more than an afterthought, something to be included out of necessity rather than a vital part of a character's DNA. While the current partnership with Def Rebel has produced some bangers, with Seth Rollins, Bobby Lashley, and Roman Reigns all receiving themes that complement their characters, there's about 100 other stars whose music is nothing more than nondescript noise. Number 6, establish another partnership with a major company. During his time in charge of WWE, Vince McMahon was seemingly hell-bent on isolating himself and WWE from any and all outside wrestling companies. However, now in this post-Vince world, sort of, the possibility of WWE not only acknowledging other promotions and talent outside their walls, but actually working alongside them, it's not quite as ridiculous as it once might have seemed. After all, we've already seen Tripp send out friend requests to New Japan, AAA, and Noah through the allowed use of their contracted talents such as Shinsuke Nakamura, Carl Anderson, and Rey Mysterio, something that quite simply wouldn't have flown back in the day. Now, whether Tripp wants to extend his outreach to other companies just to be nice, or it's part of a global domination plan, or, more realistically, if it's just a move to spite AEW and their working relationship with their peers, regardless, Tripp needs to keep it coming. There are plenty more fish in the sea and simply so much further these partnerships could go. Number 7, new looks for Raw and SmackDown. While Triple H has undoubtedly established his own roster with plenty of familiar favorites returning to re-establish themselves under Hunter's regime, the same can't be said for the show's presentation as a whole. Another long-standing complaint has been how Raw and SmackDown and even the pay-per-views lack their own identity in terms of set design, presentation, production, etc. Now, stop me if I once again sound like a moany old man, but back in my day, Raw and SmackDown felt distinct. SmackDown fierce, Raw's very metal feel. Once again, the two shows felt separate to each other, which prevented WWE's product as a whole from feeling stale. While it's hard to imagine the unique sets making a return, it would be nice for Triple H to put his stamp on things and freshen up the theme music, maybe even the logos at the very least. And this is Triple H we're talking about, the metalist of metal dudes. If he gets his way, I'm sure we can expect a lot of Motorhead, Steely aesthetics, and I don't know, what else is metal? Tempest. Number 8, integrate NXT more into main roster programming. Amongst the many improvements from the Vince era of creative, Triple H's integration and acknowledgement of NXT as a third brand in WWE that actually exists in WWE's canon has been amongst his most welcome moves. It was pretty well documented that Vince didn't particularly care for NXT or its stars. If anything, he seemed to resent them for some weird Vince reason. While Vince wasn't much of a fan, Triple H loves NXT. It's his baby after all, and his best pal HB Shizzle is of course running it now. So for your Carmelo Hayes, Cameron Grimes, and Zoe Starks of the world who are likely due for a call-up in the near future, they don't have to fear a last-minute repackaged, stupid nickname, or a helmet being given to them on the main roster. The Raw and SmackDown after Mania were traditionally the time to introduce these new faces to the main roster, so why not do the same this year? Number 9, NXT Europe. As mentioned in Entry 6, Trips would ideally like himself some global wrestling domination. Oh, sorry, what I meant to say was global localization. Yes, sorry, that's not the same thing though, is it? While closing NXT UK's doors last year was disappointing, it was promised to be a necessary step in order to ultimately introduce the NXT Europe brand, with other brands for other regions expected afterwards, such as NXT Japan, NXT India, Mexico, North Pole, South Pole, Springfield. Point is, Trips wanted himself a bit of a wrestling monopoly. Trips' drive to do so knows no bounds. We know he's going to continue to pursue this in the future. While the other NXT brands are a question mark at this point, we know at the very least Europe is in the pipeline, so chalk this one up to an inevitability. And number 10, change the pay-per-view schedule. To finish off, we have one last request for Hunter. Please, for the love of God, get rid of the gimmick pay-per-views. No more Hell in a Cell, Extreme Rules, TLC. No thank you, we've had enough. Thankfully, unlike Vince, who seems hell-bent on restraining these matches to one particular date on the calendar, Triple H seems to share the opinion that these gimmick shows kinda suck balls and should go away. On a separate note, maybe while Trips is rejigging, he should also make a conscious effort to trim the fat a bit. Not from you, Hunter, you're lovely, but instead the amount of events held in the calendar year. The once per month or more formula that WWE has followed for decades now is debatably a bit excessive. While AEW may fall too far on the too limited 4-5 per year format, perhaps WWE can meet in the middle and go for one every 2 months. Not only would it naturally allow the purging of the aforementioned gimmick shows, but it would allow for consistently and properly built shows that feel really important rather than rushed. So yeah, do that, Mr. King of Kings, and make sure to send your thanks to your old pal Adam for all the killer suggestions. And that's our list. What would you like to see from Triple H? And if you want to see another list like this, check out last week's, which is all about 11 pitches for WrestleMania 39. Roll that clip. There's nothing that stands between us and WrestleMania 39 except time, hype, and increasingly weird Paul Heyman promos. What, Paul?